Are the government spying on you through your smartphones? Should you publish your content as accelerated mobile pages in the future? And did you know that hack spam could be seriously affecting your SEO? Welcome to This Week in Organic, episode number 20.
This Week in Organic. Live from London on thisweekinorganic.com.
Broadcasting live on Blab, you're watching This Week in Organic, the weekly show that debates the ramifications of the latest SEO and content marketing news. Sign up to watch the next show live at thisweekinorganic.com. Hello and welcome, I'm David Bain, and each week I'll be joined by some knowledgeable, opinionated folks to discuss the latest happenings in anything that impacts organic traffic. And as for you, dear viewer, get involved. So click on the Tell a Little Bird button to your top left-hand side, so that's up there, to share the show with your friends and tell us what you think in the comment section as well, so just over there. That'd be great to hear from you. So I'll try and read out as many comments as I can. But let's find out more about today's guests, where they're from and what's caught their attention this week. So starting off with Justin.
Hi, David. My name's Justin DeVille. I'm Managing Director at Receptional. We're a digital agency, and you can find us at receptional.com.
Wonderful. Okay, and moving on to Danny.
So, my name is Danny Ashton. I'm the founder and CEO of NeoMam Studios. We are a influencer marketing agency. And we're based in Manchester. And if you want to check out our stuff, it's at neomam.com.
An influencer marketing agency. I like that description. Might have to dig into that a bit more. And last but not least, we have Andrew.
Hi guys, I'm Andrew Steele. I'm the head of SEO at Equator. We are, this is going to sound even crazier, an ideas agency. So basically what we do is deliver integrated marketing, design and development solutions for clients operating in an increasingly more connected world. And you can find this at equator.com, EQTR.com.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Andrew. By the way, your volume seems just a little bit lower than the other couple, so
sure.
You could possibly either hold your microphone closer, or maybe in your computer sections, just settings, just turn it up. That'd be wonderful. But
sure.
Moving on to our first topic, so that's Facebook are talking about launching a satellite to provide internet coverage in poorer countries. But what I'm wondering, is this a philanthropic exercise, or are there other motives involved? Who should we talk to first about this one? Justin, are Facebook all about philanthropy here?
Oh yes, of course they are, David. Yes. No, of course, there's a business motive behind providing broadband, and I think Facebook and also Google are doing very similar things around the world, aren't they? I mean, they're such enormous companies now that it's really important for them that everyone should be on broadband, and as they reach the limit of people who are kind of internet enabled in Western advanced economies, they need to spread broadband further around the world so that they can increase the size of the audience, because they're up against that limit. So with Facebook, I mean, of course, it's by installing broadband in other countries that don't already have it, it's going to try and bias the market in its own favour.
Yeah.
I think, though, long term, that they become unstuck if that becomes too biased. You can tilt the playing field a little bit in your favour, but if they're going to try and block out any other big tech companies, then I think they'll undermine their own position.
Yeah, tilting the playing field is a good description. That's what I would describe Windows 10 as possibly doing as well. And a lot of big companies try and tilt a little bit. But Danny, do you think this is tilting too much, or have Facebook got a really good proposition in mind by providing internet to countries that don't really have decent broadband at the moment?
Well, it's interesting because I remember this week I came across an article which was a survey about, especially people in Asia, about did they use the internet, and a lot of them said that they didn't use the internet, which was interesting. But when they actually looked down upon it, they were using Facebook, and actually when these Facebook users didn't actually see that as the internet. So it's actually their Facebook as their own kind of a different channel to what they define as going on the web and using it how we used to use it back in the day. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of these stuff around the satellites, there's another thing with Google, I think they had an idea. I think potentially it's all a bit, it's just a kind of a PR thing. I really can't imagine it paying for itself. But I don't know. We'll have to see it when it happens, really. Maybe I'm being too cynical.
That's interesting. No, I mean, it certainly is good PR. It got to the first page of most newspapers, I would imagine. So that works. But do Facebook need more PR? Andrew, can you see this being a great move by Facebook, or do you think other businesses competing online that perhaps don't necessarily want to deal with Facebook should be concerned about Facebook having a bit of a monopoly situation in the future?
I think it's definitely an interesting one. I think, looking purely at the kind of audience that opens them up to, I'd seen something within the last couple of weeks about the kind of figures for the African user base of Facebook. I think 3 months or so maybe that they've had offices in South Africa, and they're talking about 125 million active users already within Africa. 95% of which I think are using mobile to access it. So, in terms of being able to make Facebook more accessible within, a large market like that, yeah, it makes sense, because ultimately for Facebook to be able to monetize itself, it's all about continuing to grow its audience, because you can sell advertising more when you can advertise to more people in the simplest sense of things. So I can see why they might want to do it. In terms of how successful it will be, or whether it's just a bit of a marketing stunt there, as Danny was saying, it's hard to tell right now, but it would be quite a lot to invest, I guess, in a marketing stunt, with what they're talking about doing. Whether it will put people off by, kind of walling out anyone else, I don't know that they've, or certainly I've not seen enough kind of detail of how they plan to implement it, or even anything about, whether there's going to be, what the costs associated with being able to access it would be. But in the simplest sense, I can see why they might want to do it, as that kind of continuing to try and break new ground and break, open new audiences who can use Facebook, and again continue to push, how much Facebook are able to monetize their platform, the content that exists on it.
So, Danny, Andrew talked about Facebook potentially walling out other businesses. I remember kind of getting started online really in the late 90s, and actually AOL having quite a presence then. And they created a bit of a wall situation and tried to create the internet within their boundaries. Do you think that the internet escaped from that and became very democratic, and then is perhaps in danger of becoming more of a walled situation again in the future?
Well, yeah, I think there's plenty of companies that have gone through that process of trying to control it. But I think time and time again, probably when we look at the second story with Snowden, the users of the internet are always going to find a new way of getting access to things that they can't get access to. So I think a walled garden approach is going to be expected, but I think in most cases they generally fail. So if you look at the AOL example, where is that now? They're now as open as anyone else, and the business isn't what it was. I think what's interesting, some of the interest, especially in Africa, is the use of kind of mobile payments. So I know that's a major problem over there, because they don't have the banking system like we do over here. That actually Bitcoin and making payments through kind of mobile devices is really helping with businesses over there. So I think there will be secondary benefits of bringing more access over there. So I don't think it's a bad thing. If this means that Facebook's going to allow lots of people who couldn't normally afford to access the internet, in a hope of building a walled garden, but I would probably argue that in most cases that would be a failed attempt.
Okay, Stephanie in the chat saying that Facebook's still relatively young, and while profits are a driver, pioneering service has always been the first passion. So, it certainly comes across that way some of the time, the way that Mark Zuckerberg talks, and hopefully that's going to be the situation. But it's interesting that you both think that while there may be a slight concern, there's probably enough competition out there online that if Facebook did go down too much of a walled garden approach, then there will be an opportunity for other competitors to come in there. So it's probably nothing to be overly concerned about. So I think, Danny, yeah, you mentioned the second topic there, so it's probably a good time to move on to that. So that's Edward Snowden says that smartphones can be hacked by just through a single text message. and then used to spy on their owners. So could smartphone users be sabotaged there? Should they be concerned about this? Danny, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I've got to be careful, haven't I? Because I'm probably government's probably listening to our conversation right now. But I mean, I'm a big advocate, supporter of Snowden. I think he did a very brave thing in what he did. And of all the reading his book about it, obviously the Guardian articles and everything else, I think the big shot was how much the American and UK governments were looking in, and the fact that they were able to just listen in on a text message is mad, but probably something that we all expected, but we just wouldn't know we'd ever find out. Because you can imagine that, if you come across this malware of people hacking, creating kind of hacks on websites, a government-funded program is going to be able to do pretty much anything. So, I think it. Hopefully, his kind of releases is going to put more light on the situation, and I still think, again, what we talked about before, technology is always going to be moving forward, and the internet user is always going to be able to find ways around it. So I know there's lots of technology. There's like the black phone, there's like encryption and all those kind of stuff that people can do. But I just hope that it becomes a little bit more, us as voters and in the countries, that we can decide whether we feel that spying on people's mobile phones is something that we wanted to do.
Absolutely. So, Andrew, do you feel that the average user will get more concerned about privacy concerns on their mobile phone, or do you think that the average person out there just isn't going to worry about that as long as if their phone works okay?
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of think the average user is probably going to, this after this story passes, it'll probably go entirely from mine from them. I think with a lot of these things, and I think Snowden had come out and said this himself, that for a lot of these things, that the cases that it's being used in largely are, for criminal activity or terrorist activity or anything like that. And I think it's always that kind of trade-up over, how much information you want the government or governments in general to be accessing to ensure, a perceived level of security or a perceived level of activity taking place to ensure that security over, horrible events happening or anything like that. So I think for most people, it's probably just going to pass as it's something that becomes a talking point, and again, around elections and things like that, it becomes a talking point again for these kind of activities. But for the majority of people, I could see it being the kind of thing that will pass by fairly quickly from mind, and people will continue to use their mobile devices in the way that most people do, and that what you can do on mobile devices will continue to expand as well. I think it's kind of expected that governments need to be looking at information to the level they are, but at the same time, people don't like the idea that they're being spied on themselves, but they're fine with anyone else being spied on as long as it's the intent or the offshoot of that is that they feel more secure or in a safer environment.
Yeah, some great points there. We've got Justin rejoined us there, so that's great. So you can hear us loud and clear, Justin.
I can, absolutely, yes. I'm sorry I went away for a little while there, but I'm back again now.
Okay, I get the feeling that your microphone that Blab is picking up isn't the one that you're wearing on your head, but I'll leave you to ponder over that for maybe just a second or two, and just talk to Danny a little bit more about smartphone usage, and also the fact that advertisers are wanting to get a little bit more targeted in terms of who they're talking to. Do you think these privacy concerns potentially could put off consumers from wanting to receive very personalized adverts in the next couple of years, Danny?
I think definitely. I think the whole issue of ad blocker is becoming more and more important at the moment. I know there's news that the main ad blocker software that was used was recently bought by a mystery buyer, which I don't know. There's kind of all sorts of ideas that was maybe a government entity or something like that, but I don't want to go down that path. But I think most consumers don't want to be advertised in the normal way. I think that's pretty much kind of all of us could probably agree with that, regardless of how much targeting that people say that if it's targeted correctly, then it all works. I think most people don't want to be interrupted. These people who are on Facebook want to enjoy Facebook. They want to be entertained by what their friends are doing, and they don't really go on there to be sold to, which is always a challenge, because that is why Facebook and these websites exist. So I personally think that, the kind of advertising model in the way that it has been done on the internet has a limited shelf life as internet consumers become more savvy to technology, because technology can completely block ads from serving you, from tracking you. And it used to be a very small number of people, but now it is becoming such a problem that actually, the advertisers themselves are discussing it, the publishers. It's becoming an issue. And I think it's a good issue. And I only say that, obviously, creating content marketing is not advertisement. So there's an incentive for me there. But as a normal internet user, I'd be happy if I never see another banner ad or pop up ever again. But maybe people might disagree if you sell banner ads. So,
yeah, I was going to say, Danny, what does your agency do again? It's interesting though, but the point you make, does this mean that SEO will become more of a popular word, or at least a word that isn't associated so much with grey-hattedness moving forward, and that it'll actually be the correct and right thing to do, and to be part of a marketing department moving forward? Because there was a spell for a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years back, that everyone was saying that SEO is really going to die off and it's not going to happen at all.
Yeah. No, I think it's true, and I think that there has been a major shift. I was talking about this with someone the other day, and there's that period between when manipulative practices used to work, and so you could run SEO at a 90% margin business where you only had to outsource some of that link building, and it would work. And then there's that kind of transition period from there to about now, I would say, where it isn't now a dirty word, and it is something that we can talk about and actually say we do help with SEO, and SEO is a metric and a goal that we want to support, because the algorithm has finally caught up, and you can't run it how. And I'm not saying that I didn't involve in that. I was certainly in my affiliate days, but I think it's just as any industry, it grows, it changes. And as during those transition periods, people are going to, remove it from their name, don't want to talk about it. I certainly did. I was on the bandwagon as like anyone else. I didn't use the word links or anything like that because you would be tarred with the same brush. So you doing your, white hat based promotion versus someone just doing a kind of, link wheels, forum spam, the rest of it, it was all seen as the same thing. And I think it was natural that a lot of people within the industry had to kind of step away from that, and that was the way, was just to not talk about it.
We've got Andy saying in the chat that Google knows more than the governments anyway about what you do online, but most people still use Google. And I also got Stephanie saying that we had the technology to actively listen to cell phone conversation back in 2007, and she thought it was too creepy back then, but now they're deploying it, so it seems to be fairly commonplace now. Justin, do you think that it's just a case of the line in terms of what's acceptable seems to move all the time, and something that consumers may think is unacceptable now, maybe in 2 years' time, will be acceptable, and that's just the way progress is made?
Yes, I think that's right. The consumers are often very wary of new technology and changes. And there was an example, I think, recently where Google had been looking, because Google's trying to build a self-driving car, and the biggest obstacle to that seems to be people's inhibitions about getting in a car where they don't feel in control. And so Google apparently had been looking back at the history of other technological developments, and they looked at the development of the lift or the elevator in the US. And of course, when elevators were first built, they were these scary things within a building that could easily collapse. And so people were wary about going in them. So you always used to have, and you see it in the old films, you always used to have an elevator attendant, someone who would also be in the lift with you to make you feel safe. And it wasn't, I think, according to the myth that I heard, it wasn't until the 1960s that there was a strike of elevator attendants, and people realized, well, actually, you could just get in the lift and press the buttons yourself, and then and then they got used to that technology. And I think it's exactly the same thing with with the online technologies that we're seeing now, whether that's the software of a self-driving car or ad blocking software. In the end, there seems to me to be a convergence between the old-fashioned principles of independent journalism and advertising used to be very separate, and there's a convergence nowadays, so those things are coming closer together, and we see editorial content that isn't written by journalists and therefore can have a bias towards a particular brand, and we accept that as consumers if we're interested in that brand or that that content.
Okay. There's a few different points I was thinking while you were actually saying that. But in relation to that, obviously, you've got Google Customer Match, launching as well, which is getting very personalized as well in terms of advertising. And I was thinking about what Danny said, and that you focus on content marketing, but is something like Google Customer Match, Danny, not a really great opportunity to drive people back to content? And do you not want to actually integrate paid advertising with content marketing as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in a very I think there's always going to be a transition period as we move forward. But yeah, in the short term, I don't see there's no reason why using those campaigns where you're able to actually pick up from people who've consumed your content and bring them back. But I think that the future is going to be less of kind of interruption based, and you are going to your content itself has to kind of sell the brand, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's like anything, it will depend on how we use it as an industry, and hopefully it doesn't get overused and all the rest of it. So yeah,
exactly. I mean, Andy's saying in the chat, Google Match is going to be awesome when it's rolled out if done correctly and not abused. But you can just imagine people abusing it and just going a little bit too far in terms of personalizing and just creeping,
getting stalkerish. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Andrew, do you have any concerns about that? Have you looked into what Google Match might be able to provide? And also with paid search in general, do you actually try and use that to assist with SEO efforts as well?
Yeah, absolutely. As I was saying at the start, for ourselves, we work in a very integrated way and try not to look at things for clients in terms of channels, but more, what they're trying to deliver and, the approaches that are best to do that. So I think, with things like Customer Match, I think exactly as Andy was saying in the chat there, it can be a great thing and a really powerful thing. But I think the thing that's important to bear in mind with any of these kind of advances is that it has to be of, creating value for your users or your audience that you're trying to target, rather than a race to the bottom of just spamming people effectively. There will be undoubtedly people who will use these kind of things like Customer Match to just spam email lists of people with targeting, and, they'll serve them up irrelevant things, and they'll get a very low engagement rate with them. But where things like Customer Match have the potential to be very valuable is if you're using it in a sensible way, and only really kind of putting things in front of a very kind of focused and segmented audience that more than just their email about, that you think what you're going to be offering them or presenting to them is going to be of value for them, and that that they'll convert. And whether that's sharing content with them that you think the conversion metric might be the engagement with it, or whether they share it, or just the fact that they read it and consume the message, or whether it's sending them offers about things for like a hotel room or a table booking at a restaurant, or a product or anything like that. It's ultimately comes down to using these things smart, and some people won't and some people will, and the people who will they'll continue to be fine, and their users will be fine with getting them. But it's it's the same way that the telephone can be used to spam people with auto dialer phone calls, but it's always nice when you get a nice call from a company that are genuinely offering something of use or value to you. I think it's as simple as that, really, in my eyes.
Absolutely. No, it's a great point that spam was around before the internet. It didn't just happen as soon as technology happened. So, I mean, Justin, we've got Facebook retargeting at the moment, and that's very effective. And it's nice to have an alternative to that, I suppose. Does Reception or your agency offer like consultancy services with regards to Facebook retargeting? And if so, might you actually look to do the same with this new service by Google as well?
Yes, we do. It is one of the things that we do. And in fact, I had a client in this morning who I was talking to them about that feature coming live and the ways that we might use it. And I think, as Andrew said, any technology can be used both for good and for evil, if we're going to put it in binary terms. And for responsible brands, then you're going to be able to use that Google retargeting, effectively and in a helpful way. And there's lots of other services that Google has introduced. For example, I leave for a meeting in the morning and Google pings me and tells me I need to go and get my train, otherwise I'm going to miss my meeting. And that's now a useful service that I rely upon, which is unpaid. But it might be the case that a customer buys a product from you, and usually you buy another product a month later, and Google and we can use that remarketing system just to let the customer know that they're likely to need to reorder, and they might find that was a helpful thing to be doing. And again, that's the convergence between useful content and advertising.
Yeah.
So it's certainly something we'll be investigating and trying with our clients. I saw there was a post, I think, on WordStream's blog, and they described this as the most important advance in AdWords ever. And I thought, well, let's calm down a little bit. I think it will be useful in some ways. In the same way as remarketing, we use that with most of our clients, but it adds another 10% onto the business. It doesn't revolutionize what's already happening.
Yeah, no, but I love the opportunity to be more integrated in terms of marketing approach, and the fact that it can assist content marketing, and it's not just about driving people to one action. And if that action doesn't happen, then you've lost them forever. It's nice to be a little bit cleverer, certainly.
Yes. Hopefully, you're trying to build relationships over time.
Absolutely. Yeah, another key word. Well, coming up, we're going to be talking about hacked spam, accelerated mobile pages, and Twitter moments. But first of all, if you're enjoying the talk here, that'd be great if you could tell a little bird, click on the tell a little bird button and share the discussion with some people. We've had some great comments so far as well. So if you'd like to add your opinion there, we'll read it out, and it'd be great to have the interaction as well. But moving on to the next topic, which is, did you know that hacked spam not only puts off users, it can also significantly impact your search rankings? Because, of course, Google have announced a hacked spam algorithm update that's impacted around 5% of rankings. So fairly significant, really. So, Andrew, would you say that most SEOs are actually aware of the dangers from an SEO perspective of hacked spam?
Yeah, I'd like to think that most probably are. I know certainly there's a statistic flying about from, I think it's maybe a couple of years old now, but and certainly in the kind of early days of manual actions, that hacked spam manual actions were the second most common effective notification that people got of a manual action, presumably after link spam, basically. It's certainly something that we've seen across a variety of verticals that has been a problem, and it's definitely something that Google have put a lot of focus on, and the results are ultimately cleaner now as a result of the actions they've been taking in this area than they had been in the past. But I would definitely say that most SEOs would be aware of that, and also the importance of that, because it's something that people were using to manipulate results, and ultimately it's not good for Google and long term, because an experience of Google for anyone using it is the quality of the results that they get there, and obviously security in general online has become an increasing area of focus for people over the last couple of years, definitely, but probably since people have been online as well, and it's something that Google need to be taking action on, and seen to be taking action on as well, to ensure that kind of continued safety for people using not just Google, but anything that they find through Google as well, because people will naturally, if they end up losing their details to a hacked site or anything like that, then they're naturally going to be wondering why they found that in Google in the first place. Certainly, people who are less savvy and familiar with how Google works, and how they kind of police the web, if you like. So I would say, I think most SEOs would be aware of that, and I'd hope most would be, having at least a simple level of monitoring, even if it's just looking at Search Console or Webmaster Tools that used to be noted, to make sure that they're keeping an eye on any of the kind of alerts that come through on that, but also, working with kind of web teams and hosting teams to be keeping an eye more widely on what's going on in the activity at the kind of back end of a website.
So would you say that webmasters need to be more concerned about potential hacking now than a couple of years ago, say?
I don't know if they need to be more concerned now, but I think, you know, the ways of hacking sites obviously continue to become more and more sophisticated. And if you go along to any of the kind of conferences for even the sort of open source CMS providers, will always be, you know, kind of talking and keeping their user base informed of any kind of security breaches that they find with their services, and updating on that. And in general, actually, that seems to become a lot more common practice for businesses, and, you know, in general, you know, you'll see quite regularly stories going up about, you know, security breaches online for sites, or you know, for services that take place online. So I think it's just something that webmasters should always be mindful of, and, you know, no more so now, I guess, than any time before. But it's certainly good to see that Google are taking more action in this area, and I think they're beta testing as well how they deal with the kind of manual actions for hacked sites, so that, you know, it makes it a bit easier for smaller businesses or smaller site owners who are maybe less technically minded to be able to deal with these things, because they're talking about, I think, automatically rolling back manual actions for hacked sites if, you know, they find that the symptoms of what they'd identified to generate that manual action in the first place have been corrected. So I guess to take it back to the question that you specifically asked, no, I don't think that there's any more or less reason now to be concerned about this than there had been before. It's just generally something that I think is good practice to keep on top of and be observant about.
So I'm kind of sticking with Andrew in this one, because I think it would be fair to describe him as probably the hardest core SEO as part of this discussion. So just in relation to this, if a webmaster does discover that they have been hacked and they've got some pages in their site that they certainly didn't put up, and it's obviously some spammer that's put them up, what are the next steps after that? What software maybe should they use, and are there a few general simple steps that they need to take to try and ensure that it doesn't happen again?
I think it really depends. You know, each site will be different in the setup, and everyone will have their own different tools. I know that, you know, internally for us, we work with across not just the SEO team, but also our development and kind of hosting teams to keep an eye on these things as well. So we're, you know, working to look at things like server logs and all these kind of things. And in terms of being able to identify these kind of issues and deal with them, you know, if you're finding content that's gone up that you know you haven't created, then at the very least from an SEO perspective, you would want to be conducting a full crawl of the site to see what all the pages are, and kind of looking for any of the patterns to the ones that you know you haven't created yourself. So again, you know, if it was going up in a blog, as is fairly common for where these pages go, then you would want to be looking at your own kind of publication calendar, and then you could use that to quite quickly filter through any pages that are going up that you haven't had a hand in, and be looking to remove those, certainly. But then in terms of, you know, the security breaches that have allowed someone to get into your site, I guess, you know, at a simple level, if it's a blog, you're going to want to change your login details and things like that, but also check for, you know, the latest kind of any sort of plugins that you're using, updates to those in case there's security breaches through those. And, you know, to be honest, there's plenty of things at a more technical level that go way beyond, you know, my capabilities. And I always said, you know, that's why one of the reasons why we work across a variety of teams here at Creator to deal with these kind of things. But, you know, those are a good starter for 10, I guess, if you're, you know, if you think you've experienced these kind of issues.
Yeah, some great tips there. Thanks. So, Danny, it looks like you're going to have to find another way to publish all this content then. So, I mean, are you concerned, Danny, maybe from a content perspective of appearing on sites that perhaps have been hacked and may even reduce the perceived quality of what you publish in other sites, or is it not generally something that you consider in the areas that you're involved in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a worry, isn't it, when you produce content and it gets shared, you know, and always the thing we say to clients is, look, we can't control who's going to pick it up and run with it. But I think that Google's a lot cleverer than we give it credit for, or probably many of us in the room already do give it credit. But you know, the difference between something being shared virally, going wide, and everyone covering it from every, you know, maybe 70 different countries, to a SEO campaign where there's an obvious manipulative action and you're kind of placing links on certain sites. The way it looks in every kind of variable is so obvious. So I think there's always going to be a bit of crap. There's going to be scrapers always, especially when you get content featured on big sites. Scrapers are going to pick it up, and Google has to account for that. There's no way that they're going to start. The world is not a perfect place, as is either is the internet. So there's always going to be a bit of murkiness going on. But I think from a kind of the whole hack point of view, I think. I'm certainly not a technical guy, and probably why the question wasn't deemed at me. But I've certainly had issues, even with content working for a long time, especially with clients who use WordPress. I think WordPress is one of the biggest, riskiest things that they can use, because that's the main kind of key focus for people getting into a lot of these sites. It's one of the reasons why when we rebuilt our site, we built it just in plain HTML, because I was like, well, my main thing is I don't want someone hacking it, because it's just something that no one likes to deal with, where it's an agency or a client. So I do think there's probably going to be a response to this kind of increase in hacking as people move into different ways of kind of hosting their content, if they don't require the database capabilities of some kind of very popular CMS systems, which are notoriously bad because people don't update them and people don't look after them and all the rest of the reasons. But yeah.
Danny, do you think it's fair to say that WordPress is notorious for actually getting hacked into, or is it just simply the fact that people don't update it enough?
Yeah, well, I think it's just because it's popular. It's the same way. I mean, there'll be and I think the challenge is obviously it's always, whenever I've had sites hacked of my own, it's usually the plugins I've installed. Yeah. And so people get plugin crazy and they go, and then you forget which plugins you've got, and it's usually there, the open doors. There is a site, and it's a paid service. So, take that with a grain of salt. But as a non-technical guy, I use it all the time, which is Securi. They have a service where you sign up for a year, they watch your site, and if it has a problem, they fix it. And they are, and I'm not on an affiliate link, I promise, they just are excellent. So if you aren't, you don't have a team of developers and you don't have someone, and you just want to not worry about it, get their 150 quid yearly package or something, because it's well worth it.
I see Andy's saying in the comments, webmasters should always worry about hackings, but not just from an SEO perspective, but also from a brand reputation perspective. Justin, have you worked with any clients who have actually been hacked and perhaps actually seen a bit of a fall in brand reputation because of it, and perhaps you've had to do some work to have to recover this?
Then I can... Yes, I can tell you about people that I've worked with whose sites have been hacked. But I can probably go one better, and I probably shouldn't admit this in public. But we have a WordPress site at Reception as an agency, and last year our site was hacked as well. And so I agree with the comments about how popular WordPress is. And if I was a hacker trying to break into a website, then WordPress would be the one I would choose, because there's just so many different WordPress websites, and I can write a crawler that goes around and finds them all and then breaks in. The reason that our site was hacked was because of an extension that we'd had on the site, and there was a known vulnerability, and the developer who had written it hadn't then informed everybody about this vulnerability. So lots of the sites that had been using that extension had then been hacked, which is not fantastic. And so since then we're rebuilding our site with our own theme, and we're using a minimal number of extensions, which I think is advice we've already had. I'd also say that kind of in terms of security for a WordPress site, because they're so vulnerable, I would be saying that we now have a double layer of authentication. So we have passwords both on WordPress and on the server, so you can't access one without accessing the other. And also with WordPress, I would be suggesting changing the URL in which you log in at, because lots of WordPress sites are set up and they have a standard login page. And of course, you can send a crawler around to look for that page. You know where to expect it, and then it's easy to kind of to try and break into the site. So you can try a different URL setup, and all of those things together have made our site much more secure since it was attacked last year. And of course, from an agency point of view, the brand reputation, you were asking about at the beginning, it's not a good place to be.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, also Sam Torres saying in the chat, I second the support for Securi. WP Engine is a host that partners with them too, highly recommended. Andy Halliday saying I prefer WordFence to Securi, but they're both great plugins for securing a site. So I guess the message is maybe pay a little bit more for your hosting. Go for a WordPress specialist, and that only perhaps even allows certain plugins there as well, because they know WordPress, they know the potential weak points as well. And if you do that, you're going to be better than 90% of other websites out there. So you're not going to be a weak link within the WordPress marketplace. So hopefully you're going to reduce your likelihood of that happening.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, moving on to the next topic, which is another update from Google, and that's the introduction of accelerated mobile pages. But is this a real user experience improvement or an attempt to defend against the walled gardens of Facebook and Apple? So these accelerated mobile pages, Justin, maybe staying with you, do you think they potentially could offer a highly enlightened, enhanced experience for users, or is this more of a marketing opportunity for Google to try and actually position themselves in the same place as Apple and Facebook?
But I imagine it's a bit of both. We were talking earlier about trying to tilt the playing field in your favour, didn't we? And this is something that Google is clearly trying to do. And it seems to me, whether it's this initiative or something else, is that we're all carrying around mobile phones now. The majority of searches are made on mobile phones. And so it seems to me that something or other will have to speed up that experience of using mobile phones to access the internet. And it seems to me that this is an interesting starting point. My understanding is that the pages are really stripped back and bare so that you really only have HTML pages. So it's a bit like, going back 10 years in terms of the sort of bare layout of a page. You can't then have any of the JavaScript on the page that we've all become used to. It is a text-based experience that you're largely getting. And so from a marketer's point of view, I was kind of horrified at the thought of not being able to access my Google Analytics and to see what was going on the site. But from a mobile perspective, then absolutely, then it does make sense that if I'm using a mobile phone, I want an instant experience. I think it's really at the beginning, though, isn't it? It's difficult to say at this point as to kind of how successful it's likely to be. But whether it's this or something else, then I think Google is pushing very hard to speed up the mobile experience, and they've got a lot of high-profile publishers involved in this project. So the list I was looking at was the BBC, the FT, New York Times, Hearst Publications were all involved in this project. And as it develops, then I think they've got the right people behind them, and so it'll be interesting to see where it gets to.
Absolutely, yeah. It made me, what you're saying there also made me think about the fact that the file sizes of web pages have increased so much over the last few years. A few years ago, it was recommended not to have web pages more than about 100K. Now you see many web pages which are more than a meg as well. And you've got web designers that just don't care or don't even know that their big bloated PNGs are seriously going to affect the user experience. So I suppose it's a way to deal with that, and that's the challenge of the responsive design as well, because quite often with responsive design, the whole source code has to load before actually whichever browser it is aware that it's actually only a set width and only certain elements within the design that should be loaded. Andrew, do you think these new accelerated mobile pages should actually be a good thing for SEO, a good thing for user experience, or do you think SEOs may be concerned about how this is actually going to impact rankings, for instance, in the future?
I think it's a good question. I think in general, as Justin was saying there as well, Google are very focused at the moment on the mobile experience for people, and faster loading content can only be a good thing, I suppose, for SEO. If you think again back to what we were talking about before, of ultimately the aim of anything should be to provide the best possible user experience. If you're trying to sell anything or serve content or anything like that, so faster pages definitely in line with that. I think there's probably a fair few considerations that need to be made from SEO, certainly, in terms of if you're running these kind of pages alongside, a fuller version of your site, then things like canonical tagging or, all the kind of usual things that you need to be mindful of in terms of duplication of content will come into it. But I know that we work very closely with our developers and designers in general for things like responsive design, which is one of the things as an agency we've actually been quite famous for, to ensure that, the way that things load, that, that we're using sensible inlining where possible in the execution of files as well, to try and speed things up, and page speed in general has been a big focus area for us across those teams, certainly over this year, because of the focus on mobile that's increasing there as well. So I think seeing Google coming out with these AMP pages, and Facebook just before that launching their instant articles, it's no surprise really. But I think the interesting thing again to be mindful of what Google are doing with the MP pages is that it still loads ads, and at the end of the day, that's a good thing for Google, because they're focused on media, and they make money from they're focused on mobile, sorry, and they make money from advertising. So it's no surprise to see that advertising will still be a feature in there. But as Justin said, I think beyond that, it's quite stripped down, and it's to the point content, and the type of content that people are probably going to consume for this is going to be quite simplified. So there's probably some considerations, perhaps not specifically SEO, but more general marketing ones, of what are you including on these pages, given the stripped down kind of less design type elements. That's there's a potentially a much higher focus on the quality of your copy and how you're able to describe and sell your product and service, if it's if it's that type of page, or make your content engaging, because it's going to load quicker, so people are either going to get to the point quicker, or they're going to get bored and leave. So those kind of considerations as well, I think, need to be factored, along with the kind of the general SEO considerations around kind of managing potential duplication of content and that. But generally, I'm all for it. I think it's a good thing to be able to make content load faster for people. But, as a mobile user and consumer of content myself, it's ideal.
So how do you actually track what's happening on these pages if you can't have JavaScript in there then?
My understanding is that they're working already on a way around being able to get analytics in there, but it might be a kind of simplified down version of that, because it wouldn't make sense for Google as a provider of this to then create a way of delivering pages that you can't track anything in. But I think we all probably have to be prepared for a much more simplified experience of that. So whether goal tracking and things like that are going to be possible, potentially not. But my understanding was that it's a much more simplified versions of JavaScript that can operate on it. I can only assume that they're going to be working to that. But personally, I don't know enough of the detail around that yet. But I can't see why Google would ever get to a point of allowing this to be produced and serve ads, but not actually be able to track what's going on with them, because ultimately I don't think you can really sell advertising and not have people be able to make informed decisions about what that advertising is doing in this format.
And also, Andrew, in relation to the previous question, actually, Sam said, would you guys recommend adding an SSL to help with these challenges with spam? Now, I mean, obviously, from an SEO perspective, you've got to make the call on SSL with a big picture in mind. It can be challenging changing your URLs, but simply from a spam perspective, can SSL help with that?
It's security really at the end of the day, isn't it? I think if you can add it, and you can add it in a way that's going to be completely healthy from an SEO perspective, then yeah, I'm all for it. And I think in general, a lot of the web's clearly going that way. Google, there's been the stories, I think it was last year, the start of this year, about Google's kind of looking around that in terms of potentially even making it a positive ranking signal to have SSL sites, and penalising non-SSL sites was something else that was talked about as well. So security is always a focus there. I think if you can, then it's great. But as you say, David, it's not something that we would ever approach lightly as if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, that you can just go on and stick an SSL certificate on your site, and there's not a lot of work that goes on around there to ensure that you're not going to lose out traffic or rankings or anything like that, because implementing SSL, even at small levels for small sites, still has definite work that needs to take place in terms of, again, redirects and redirect mapping across the site, and making sure that you are serving up one version ultimately, or making it clear to Google which your preferred, or Google and all search engines, I guess, which your preferred version of your pages is. So there's definitely a lot of considerations that need to be made for that, whether you're planning to implement a certificate just partially on your site or site-wide. There's definitely a lot of work and consideration needs to go in planning that, to make sure that you don't ultimately damage the performance of your site long term.
And Danny, you've certainly focused a lot on image-led content marketing in the past. Would you be concerned that Google are perhaps encouraging websites to publish just in text, and how you think, if any way, it might impact your marketing activities?
Well, from what I've read about it, it does seem to be they want to not give it just as a pure HTML. It's going to utilize some of the other technologies like video and imagery as a part of that within that framework. And we've been actually playing around with, one of the problems with the static infographic format, it's one image. Depending on the way a site's set up, it's quite hard to be responsive. So we've been creating like responsive versions of that. So developing within HTML frameworks that are relatively simple, that allow people who are on different browser types, mobile, tablet, what have you, to then view that experience. And I think that's similar to what kind of Google's attempting with it. I mean, it still comes back to their kind of, their core idea, which is it's their fight against ad blocking. People are complaining that and then there was a study, and I'll try and share it in the comments, which was analyzing big publisher websites with ad blocker on and ad blocker off, and the difference was massive in the amount of load times, and that is something that is going to become more and more of an issue if people, and that's a good thing. I don't think we things have become a bit bloated in regards to kind of tracking, and I think anything that we can do to cut that down and improve the experience that people have is only a good thing. And as content marketers, we need to always be looking at this next level technology. Again, I'm not a technical guy, but I know that when we built our agency site, we used SVG technology for the images, because we wanted to keep our the load time of the entire site really, really fast. So we're quite proud of using that latest technology to make sure that things can be done in a way. It's just a little bit more thinking time that goes into a bit more development to make sure that it works. And certainly, if you're willing to hang around for the long term, then it's worth it, really.
I'm just looking up online to see what SVGs are actually, because I was aware of image sprites. Certainly, is that similar to that?
You'll have to ask the developer. Okay. All he told me was SVGs. I think I'm always interested in where technology is moving with, and I think it's a way of showing imagery on the site that's a slightly quicker way. But I don't know anyone who knows more about it.
Apparently, it's an image format for vector graphics. It basically means scalable graphics. So when you increase in size, you're not going to lose any quality at all.
Exactly. So and that's perfect for obviously a kind of responsive experience, really.
Okay. Yeah. Well, moving on to the last topic, and that's Twitter is introducing something it calls Twitter Moments. So calling it the best of Twitter in an instant, offering users the chance to catch up with stories that matter to them. But will Moments do for Twitter and advertising in Twitter a good thing or a bad thing? So Twitter Moments. Justin, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, my feeling is, David, that I enjoy Twitter and I really like it as a platform, but it seems to have stalled to me over the last 12 months or so. And I think looking at the growth in Twitter numbers, that seems to have stalled as well as the technology. And so I can see that with Twitter Moments, which I hadn't seen before this week, so it's a good opportunity to go and have a look. It's for anyone else who hasn't seen them, it's really much more image based with a story underneath. So if you've got the Super Bowl or a big sporting event, you might have a Twitter moment for that and show lots of images and Twitter commentary. I don't think that's going to be enough to change Twitter's direction. I don't think we're radically changing the Twitter platform with that, and it's going to start increasing subscriber numbers again. Would be my feeling, which is a shame. But it seems to me that Twitter Moments are really about creating content, which is just what everyone else is doing. And so, where's the competitive advantage to Twitter in offering that content? I can create a Twitter moment and just as easily as Twitter can create it. And then it's about the quality of the journalists and the content producers that you've got creating that content. And I don't think that's much of a competitive advantage.
It's definitely saying that bringing non-Twitters a comfort level to try Twitter seems like a tag board across with traditional media. Danny, have you checked this out at all?
Yeah, I mean, I agreed with Justin. I think I've been on Twitter for a number of years now, and I think it is I mean, I don't know what everyone else thinks, but even the advertising, it just seems really, really annoying. I know people who don't want to even use the main channel because of that, and I think it's a problem that they have, that they're not really sure what to do with it and where to make the money. Moments and kind of going down the image route and creating stories from stuff. I think it's one of them where, let's have a chat in 12 months. I don't think it will do anything, but that's just me. But I don't know.
Yeah, but apparently advertisers have already agreed to do this. So they're going to launch advert free, but certainly the intention is within a few weeks to actually roll out advertising related to this. So it'll certainly have to be a great user experience to get people to use it. Andrew, are you a regular tweeter, or do you love the platform?
I use Twitter. I wouldn't say I'm a power user by any means, but I do find it useful for keeping track of certainly news topics on things that I'm interested in. I think the interesting thing about Twitter Moments to me, I guess from a couple of points, was it seems to make sense as for new users coming onto Twitter, there's at least something to start engaging with before you can build a following, because my understanding of it is that you'll be able to see moments, and that they'll feed a lot of these through as standard into people's feeds. And as from a personal level, in using Twitter, I think it's kind of interesting, because there's nothing more frustrating sometimes than when you see something in your feed on Twitter and it's clearly relating to a bigger story, but it doesn't tell you the full picture. So, if moments allow you to be able to jump in and kind of cycle back to the start of that and kind of follow the story through in a timeline fashion, then, that's great. And, I'm all for that. I think, though, as the guys rightly point out, how advertising becomes involved in it. And again, it feels like it's been a bit of a theme of the points we're talking about here. But again, it can't be, that kind of race to the bottom. It has to be done in a very subtle way, I think, to make it genuinely useful to people, so that it doesn't just come across as just spam again. And, but in your Twitter feed, because, exactly as Danny said, there a lot of the kind of promoted tweet type adverts that, you see at the moment, or certainly that I see in my feed anyway, seem quite often to be, either unrelated or of no interest to me at all. And it is just something that's taking up space. So I think people looking to use it will have to be mindful of that. Again, though, as we said before, the other topics where we talked around this, I do believe that there'll be some people who will use it really smart and really creative ways, and it'll be something that will get a lot of engagement. It's just the thought and effort that goes into it. Kind of planning this activity, much like anything else really, that will make it a success or otherwise. But I'm totally with Danny on, let's see how it goes in 6-12 months time and how it's working, and whether it's just going to be a bit of a flash in the pan kind of fad introduction or not. But certainly, Twitter have been introducing things that have kind of been useful in that way of being able to bring topics to light, and including things like that while you were away, and picking out people that you follow or have interacted a lot with and what they've been tweeting as well. So it'll be interesting if nothing else.
We've got Andy making sure we all have the same level of props there. So, Danny, you don't think that it's an outstanding content marketing opportunity now to actually jump on over the next couple of months? You're confident that you need to just sit there and wait and see what happens, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've tried advertising on Twitter in regards to just purely content, and yeah, it's a good way to spend a lot of money pretty quick. I think that's the problem with it. I mean, the people are obviously working well, but it is a very much lead generation with the whole kit caboodle that comes with that. But I think for a content perspective, nothing, paid amplification, things like Taboola or Stumble Upon, an Outbrain are perfect, because they're, you can have some targeting. They work with publishers, and it's in the content feed. But when it comes down to it, it all comes down to influence and finding the people who influence. And at this moment in time, I think that, there's always going to be a place for kind of B2C, big kind of budget stuff. And there's people with lots of budget that just want to play with stuff on Twitter. But I think for small agencies like ourselves, I think we'll certainly wait this one out until we see how it works, really.
Justin, might you be tempted to give Twitter Moments a test in terms of actually advertising if that opportunity does come along fairly soon? Or are you one of the sit on the bench for a while, and we'll see what happens.
You know, Dave, I was smiling because Danny and I are both from Manchester. I'm assuming that's your accent, Danny.
Yes, it is.
And when he said, "Oh no, we won't spend money on that," that was my feeling as well.
And a couple of Scots here as well. So
I don't see any value in it for most clients, and I agree. It's a real kind of if you've got Pepsi or Coke's marketing budget, then of course you might want to be on Twitter. But for most of the clients that I'm working with, the kind of medium-sized business who are looking at value in their advertising, then I just don't see it in that platform at the moment. So no, it's probably not something I will try at any scale anyway in the near future. But it does seem to be that's the way that they're building at the moment anyway, because it's the materials collated by humans. Then they're investing quite a lot in putting those together, and it will be around specific big events for those big advertisers, and that's what they're targeting.
We've got Stephanie saying, have we talked Twitter buy it now buttons for mid-range retailers? Justin, is that something that you've tested at all? Have you got any clients that are doing well with other forms of Twitter advertising spend?
Then I haven't tested the buy it now buttons, so it's difficult for me to comment. But other than to say that we have run Twitter campaigns, and as Danny said, it's a very easy way of spending money very quickly without money.
Okay, well, Stephanie, I don't think we've got anyone on the call today actually having tested that one there, unless Andrew can tell me anything different.
No, again, it wouldn't be something that I manage myself and in my team, but my understanding was with those that it's a US thing only at the moment. I don't know if that's changed, that it's rolled out to the UK, but it's not something I've got any personal experience of operating in. To be honest, I've not even really seen much in the wild in my usage of Twitter either, but sorry.
No, that's fine. It's interesting that things are often rolled out in the US first of all, and then they come to the UK, and that can be the case with SEO as well, which can give the UK a little bit of option to see what's happened and prepare for what's going to happen before it actually happens to them as well. So it's I suppose it's got its positives as well as its drawbacks, things sometimes happening in the US first of all. But I reckon that just about takes us to the end of this week's show. So just about time for a single takeaway from each of our guests and some sharing and find out more details. So starting off with Justin.
Oh, excellent. So I thought the one thing that was particularly useful after the trials I've had over the last few months was talking about WordPress security, and I made a note of Securi was the recommendation there.
Good. I'm glad you're gathering tips as well as giving them.
Yes,
so that's a good combination.
Here. Don't worry, David.
And Danny.
Yes, I think I was really interested in kind of Google's new technology for looking at content and looking at maybe either trialing that for ourselves or developing something that's similar, but Google don't own, because that's always a good benefit. But yeah, great fun.
Great. And so just remind our viewers where to find you, Danny.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can either get me on Twitter at Danny Ashton or the Neomam website, which is NEOMAM.
And did you share your website as well?
Sorry, I didn't know. It's receptional.com is the agency website, and you can get me at Justin DeVille on Twitter. And
thank you. And Andrew, your final thoughts and contact details.
Yeah, I think much like Danny had said there, I think the mobile technology and the kind of improvements that Google are looking to make in terms of the speed with which content served specifically for mobile through the kind of AMP pages stuff is going to be really interesting. Again, it's something that we'll be looking at as well, because I think page speed and mobile in general are going to be increasing focus areas for digital marketing. Not that they're not already this year, but I can only see that continuing to be the case, certainly as we move forward as well, because we have reached that point now that was long talked about of, more people are accessing and using organic search through mobile devices than through desktop. So it's definitely going to be a focus area for myself and my team as well. In terms of getting in touch, the website for Equator is eqtr.com, or you can get me on at Andrew J. Steele on Twitter.
Great stuff. Thanks, Andrew. I'm David Bain, Head of Growth at Analytics SEO, the agency and enterprise SEO platform with big insights. So sign up for a free demo of our platform at analyticsseo.com. And you can also find me interviewing online marketing gurus over at digitalmarketingradio.com. Now, if you're watching this show as a recording, remember to watch the next show live. So head over to thisweekinorganic.com, and that link should automatically redirect to the next live show we do on Blab. And for those of you watching live, you can also catch up on previous episodes. We do an audio podcast on iTunes, so go directly to that at thisweekinorganic.com/iTunes. But until we see you again, have a fantabulous weekend, and thank you all for joining us. So adios, and thanks all for taking part of it. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.